All right. Just check this to make sure. Okay, we're live. All right. Hey, everyone. Happy Sunday. Welcome to the session. Thanks for coming in. We're broadcasting here from Northern California and Bangalore. Gauri will be joining us on screen today. She's the editor of Preside and based in Bangalore. And the air here is finally clear and clean from the Northern California wildfires. So everyone's breathing a little bit easier this week. Okay, so I want to welcome you to our live Sacred Space session. We are actually, I think this is session 30. This is the 30th live Sacred Space session. So woohoo, here we are. And I want to just say and open the session by saying that as always, Gary and I are honored to be with you in this time of sensitivity and uncertainty. And we look forward to sharing time with you together in our shared sacred space together today. So the things we want to do today are I'm going to go ahead and set sacred space like I do every week. Then we will talk about our topic for the week, which is the organic path of bliss, which is kind of a funny title, but it was the wording that felt most appropriate for the brainstorm that came out of our fairy tale for this week. We'll have a very short, but I think to the point exercise, and then we'll close sacred space from there. Okay. So in setting space now, I'll just say that what we intend to do together is to make a space here for the next hour or two, which is devoid of fear, threat, and control, in order for us to open to higher guidance from within our own selves, however we define that personally and individually. So your intuition, a higher power, just creative spark, your muse. And the idea here is that we would like to set a safe sanctuary space for all of us to be able to relax and surrender with no danger or threat, right? So that we can partake of the emotional nourishment and the spiritual nourishment that comes from being in sacred space together as a group. There are certain things that you can only do in sacred space. And the partaking of this kind of emotional and spiritual nourishment is one of those things. So we come together to do this in order for all of us to have, this abundance of nourishment, right, that we create together and then we share together. In an opening sacred space today, I will propose that we all follow the 4 principles of Presidian sacred space. Number 1, confidentiality. Now, online, we can't be confidential in terms of not allowing the replay to be publicly available and all that. So the way we do confidentiality here is through anonymization. So you would come into Crowdcast, you would log in, and then you would go to the edit my profile, and don't include your picture, change your username to Mickey Mouse or Harry Potter, and then from there continue participating only if you want. Only if you want. You don't have to be anonymous, but if you would like to be when you chat or post questions, that's how you would do it. That's number 1. Number 2, there's no threat or controlling, right? No fixing, no intervening for somebody else's own good, no tough love, right? And the idea here is that there's nothing necessarily wrong with any of those things, but because they are of the provenance of fear and control and threat, right? You better read this book because it'll fix you, or else you're going to be like the biggest dunderhead of the class, right? And you won't get your pain relief and you won't get your spiritual development. So there's none of that here, right? Because we're in sacred space. So the point is to hold space for each other, to be however we are, the good, the bad, the ugly, however we are, without any fear of interference, right? And when we go back out into the profane, we can say, so, Do you have a book recommendation? Do you have something to tell me what to do? And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's the realm of the profane, and we do things in the profane that are of that space. And here in the space of the sacred, it's different, where we hold space for each other to be afraid, to be anxious, to be happy and relaxed, to be anxious and to feel like a dunderhead that we are anxious when we should be calm and zen, right? Or to feel happy and relaxed, and to feel guilty that we feel happy and relaxed with all of the stuff going on in the world around us. So however you are, we just hold space for you to relax and be however you are. And there is nourishment just from doing that, Number 3, corollary to the above, no commerce, right? So because of no fear, threat, or controlling, nothing may be sold. I can't sell you anything, but it's not just things that are sold for money, but recommendations too, where it's like, oh, there's a great book you should read, or there's a great program of Artie's that you should try. It's a free program. And it's like, we don't even do that. We are here for your energy, not for the things you bring. We are here, in other words, for what you are, not for what you do or provide. And the energy of that together is what creates the sacred space. And number 4, there is no expectation of participation. So there's no pressure to do anything, to chat or not chat, to ask questions or not ask questions. Again, the nourishment comes from the held space and from your presence and attention when you feel like it, right? From what you are, not from what you do or provide. So you come and go as you please. Join sacred space, don't join sacred space, share with your friends, don't share with your friends, whatever you want to do. No expectation of participation. And all of us together will tend to amplify that. So this is what I propose. And if you are not okay with that, right, that's totally okay. There's no fear, threat, or control for you to come to sacred space or stay in sacred space. But we are about to move into this very special space together. So if you're not okay with that, we will give you a moment now to withdraw from the group, and we'll still catch up with you later in profane space and hang out. No worries at all. So I'll just give you a moment now to dial into that and make your selection. Okay. All right, and for now, for the rest of us, we will move together into sacred space. And as we come now into sacred space together, I'll just remind that we are observing the 4 principles of confidentiality, no fear, threat, or control, no commerce, no recommendations, and no expectation of participation. All right. Welcome to sacred space. And happy you're here with us. So the topic we want to talk about today is the organic path of bliss. So this week, when Gowrie and I were brainstorming, what we would talk about, she presented the fairy tale that kind of came to her, and I'll let her sort of explain the background of the fairy tale. And as we read the story together, it led us on this sort of exploration of the path of bliss, and what bliss actually looks like when it goes smoothly and unimpeded in the course of a life. Because there's a thread running through this story where basically everything goes fine. Mythopoetically fine. There's someone does get eaten by a tiger, but it's mythopoetic, it's symbolic. But before and after that, everything goes swimmingly well, and we're like, you would expect conflict, you would expect suppression, you would expect fear and running away, and none of those things are happening. And at the end of the story, something extraordinary and equally like not to pattern, right, happens. And so we kind of took a step back and we were like, this is kind of an example of almost like, a symbol of like what the river of bliss looks like when it's just flowing, and it's just like, yeah, hey, how you doing? I'm just doing my thing. And there's no drama or epic sort of battle of good and evil or any of that happening. And it was just beautiful to be able to sit next to this river and just watch it flow, right? So that's kind of what we wanted to share coming out of the story. I think other things will come up as well. So I was thinking we would just kind of have Gary come up and tell the story, and we'll do our usual sort of back and forth, kicking the ball back and forth, and then just kind of let the golden thread lead us, however it wants to lead us, and see what happens. So Gary, if you're there, do you want to come on screen?
Hi,
Hello.
Artie. Hi, everyone.
Yay.
Yeah, it's a real, like you said, out of pattern story today.
Yeah.
It's not like the regular fairy tales. Although, when I picked it up, it's from a very similar tradition to the folktale of the tiger's adopted son that we did a couple of weeks before.
Mm.
So this is, a forest tribe tradition in the northern and eastern part of India. It's very, very similar to the forest tribe tradition that I picked up the other story from.
Mm.
So we really talking about similar motifs in terms of the setting of the story being the forest and hunter-gatherer or farming kind of thing. So that there's a lot of those motifs, but this story is really kind of very unique in the way it flows. So we'll discuss that and kind of decide what is this that makes it so different. Okay. So you want me to start the story?
Yeah, dive in. I'll take fresh notes too, because it's always fun to hear you tell the story live.
Thank you. Right. So this story begins with it's saying a man had two daughters. So right at the outset, we have two sisters here, and the story is called Two Sisters. So these two sisters were one day sitting under a tree and waiting for a paddy to dry out in the sun. So it's a process where you just sit and kind of let nature do its thing. And they were just waiting under this tree while that was happening. And a crow happened to fly in and perch on that particular tree. And the crow had a ripe fruit in its beak. And probably intended to eat it, but the moment the two girls saw the fruit, they wanted it. And the crow happened to drop that fruit from its beak down to the ground. So the girls picked it up and ate the fruit, and they loved it. So they wanted more of that. And they asked the crow if it would help find that tree which bore this kind of amazing, miraculous fruit. And the crow started to fly, and the two sisters just followed the crow from behind. And the crow flew into the jungle for days and days, it says. And the sisters just followed the crow, and every time they felt tired, they just rested under a tree, sat down for a while, and then the crow would kind of sit and wait too. And this went on for a few days until they came into the heart of the jungle, and the crow brought them right to that tree which stood there and had the tree was full of this miraculous fruit. And the girls just picked all the fruit as much as they wanted, ate all the fruit, and they were just so happy and contented. And after they'd eaten the fruit, the elder sister told the younger one that, I would like you to fetch some water from our nearby stream. So make a leaf cup and, get some water for me. I'm really thirsty from eating all of this. So the younger sister leaves. And as soon as she leaves, she's out of the scene. A tiger comes out of nowhere and pounces on the elder sister and just eats her up. And while the sister's dying, she cries and wails out, and she sings a song, crying out to her sister. And the song goes like, "What a bad moment I chose to send you away for water. And now I'll never see you again. Never ever, not until I'm born again." So she sings that song, and then, the tiger eats her up. And the younger sister, makes a leaf cup, and she gets some water in that and walks back to the place where her sister was. And now in that place, all she finds is a skull and a tuft of hair. And the tiger's gone and hidden himself in the bushes. But when she comes close and sees what's left of her sister, she hears the tiger growling in the bushes. She instantly realizes what's happened. So she scampers up a tree and sits there between the branches to get away from the tiger. And she sits there for 7 days and 7 nights without food or water. Until one day, a couple of cowherds, come with their cattle, to graze over that spot. And they see the girl sitting up the tree, this young woman, and they persuade her to get down. And when she climbs down, one of the cowherds marries her. And then, they raise a family. And this goes on, for a few seasons, go on, and then it's finally the season when it starts to rain. And at the first rain, at the spot where the skull and the tuft of hair had fallen, out of the tuft of hair sprout bamboo shoots. And it turns into a bamboo plant. And out of the skull sprouts a gourd plant. And that grows into a large gourd creeper and sprouts gourds and, lots of gourds. And then just over time, they dry up. And these bamboo shoots grow into a huge bamboo grove. And eventually one day, the 2 cowherds come back to that spot again with their cattle. And then, they see the dried up gourds and they see the bamboo. They cut some bamboo stems and make flute out of the bamboo stem. And they make a stringed instrument, which in the language is called kendra. So they make a stringed instrument out of the gourd. And they play music with them. And they both make one instrument each for both of them, and they kind of play music. But every time they play music, and they don't realize this, but when the younger sister, the wife of one of the cowherds, hears it, she can actually hear the exact song that the older sister sang when she died. So that song keeps coming through because essentially the gourd and the bamboo stem come from that, the skull and the tuft of hair. So the same song keeps, wafting along every time they play music. And that's when the younger sister realizes that, my dead sister's spirit has never left me. She's always around. She doesn't want to leave me. And this is how she, communicates with me and connects with me, right? And then one day, the other cowherd who's unmarried, he leaves his musical instruments inside his hut and goes off to work every day. Magically, he realizes that when he comes back home every evening, his hut is all cleaned up and his, kitchen is all tidied up. His vessels are washed and stacked and everything is neat and tidy, and he doesn't know what's going on. And one day he mentions this to his other cowherd friend and his wife. And he says, I don't know what's happening, but there's something magical going on. And this is what happens. So one day when they both go for work, the wife, she she finds herself very curious about this. So she decides to go to that hut, stand outside behind a tree, and wait for whatever it is that happens in the hut while the cowherd is away. And suddenly she notices out of the kendra, out of the musical instrument, a young woman comes out and starts to sweep the hut. And she starts, cleaning the whole thing. In the moment she gets over the surprise of this thing happening, she notices that it's her older sister. It's the same woman. And she doesn't even think twice. She just rushes into the hut, hugs her sister, starts crying and says, "Don't ever go away and leave me again." So this is that moment, and the sister hugs her back, and they're both happy, they've united again. And the evening when the two cowherds come back, they're very happy at the reunion. And so the other cowherd now marries the older sister, and they both the families live next to each other and very happy. And they, generations after that, they have sons and grandsons, and just goes on, and they live happily ever after. So that's the story.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
What did you think of that the first time?
Gary, I hear a little chirping sound in the background.
Okay. There are these, I don't know, crickets or something.
Sounds like an animal. Okay.
Yeah. It's been raining like for 2 days nonstop. So I think there's a lot of frogs and crickets and all sorts of things.
I love it. I love it. That's our musical accompaniment. So yeah, I loved this story. Okay, so I have a lot of notes here on the story, but I feel moved to ask, where do you enter into that story?
To me, first of all, when it came to me, I felt like there were a lot of these like repetitive motifs coming into the story from the previous ones that we've done. For example, the tiger's adopted son and the story and song. So there's definitely a song here, but there's also the tiger, and there's the jungle and all of that that happens in the jungle. So I felt like somehow these motifs were connected and there was some kind of a continuity. I couldn't sense what that was. That's how it felt for me. And the other thing that I found absolutely fascinating was all of those transformations that happened from dying at the hands of a tiger to becoming, there's a skull and a tuft of hair, and there's a bamboo bush and a gourd, and turning into musical instrument, and then finally turning back into the same old woman. I mean, the young woman, but then, So I felt like there's a cycle, a series of transformations, which is almost like a magic trick that a magician does on stage, right? So he kind of turns a ribbon into a bouquet of flowers, and a bouquet of flowers turns into an animal, and an animal then turns back into a woman, and then there's and at the end you have a hat, right? So that's it felt like there's this magic show going on in the story. We're back at the same point at the end of it. So that was just fun for me. So I wondered where that was leading to. And the 7 days, yes, the 7-day motif as well. The 7 days she sits waiting on the branch.
I love that. So yeah, the thing about this story for me is that there are tons of things that like are in pattern, like I'm reading it and, like, yeah, I get that, this, all of this makes sense.
Mhm.
So it's almost like setting up, like according to standard expectations, at
Mhm.
least mythopoetically, right?
Mhm.
And then there are certain points where it's like it does this like head fake, and that's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
So so I thought what I'd do is I would start by setting up like, I just want to read some of the symbols from the beginning of the story, just
Mhm.
to give you a sense of what the structure is that we sort of perceived.
Right.
And then once that's in place, we can like talk about what the head fake was and what we thought that meant. Should we do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So, as the scene opens, right, there's two sisters, so two avatars of the inner feminine, right?
Mhm.
And I didn't catch this the first time you told me the story, but they're sitting at a rice paddy waiting
Mhm.
for it to dry,
Yeah.
right? So basically, I learned this from Auntie, your mom, actually, when we were in Bali. So the way
Right.
you harvest rice is you cut the rice,
Mhm.
you leave it in the field, and then the sun dries it, and then you you harvest the rice, and then the rice grains falls out.
Yeah.
So here, literally,
Mhm.
they're in the middle of harvest,
Yeah.
and they are waiting for. It's already post ripening. It's like it's the rice is just on the brink of being born and ready to come out.
Right.
And it is at this point that a crow, which is, I mean, we could do a whole session on the archetype of the crow, right? But
Mhm.
um, this part of you, because the crow is a part of you too. It's a board member for those of you who have done healing, right? It's the crow is a board member, the rice paddy is a board member,
Mhm.
two women, the two girls are board members,
Mhm.
and a crow is obviously it's a bird, so it's a symbol of the air realm, the spirit realm,
Mhm.
and the black is wisdom.
Mhm.
Right? So it's like the spirit wisdom coming to you. I mean, in the Greek tradition, it's even more pointed. So the two crows of Odin in the Nordic tradition, but in the Greek tradition, the crows that serve as messengers to Apollo. It's even more pointed, this point of wisdom, because they used to be white, and then this thing happened that we won't go into, where Apollo got angry and turned them black.
Hmm.
Right? So it is like this earned wisdom, post-transformation, post-wounding and trauma. And so this wisdom part of you brings this sweet fruit and yields it to you. There's not even like a frog king, well, what will you give me, girls, if I give you the fruit?
Yeah.
It's like straight up. It just passes you the fruit. I'm like, okay, no conflict, no deal making. Okay, let's see where this goes.
Mhm.
And they take the fruit. First of all, the first thing they do is they desire the fruit.
They want it. Yeah.
They want it, which is very interesting because they are sitting astride a field of fruit.
Right.
And they don't want, even though they're abundant in this, like you can almost call it like physical, profane nourishment, they want the sacred nourishment.
Right.
They desire it, they have it, they ask for more. The crow's like, all right, I'll take you into the jungle. And they go deep into the jungle for days, right? I mean, you go into the jungle in Eastern India. I go into the jungle from Eastern India for like 3 minutes. I can't find my way back, right?
Yeah.
So they go in for days, they're gone, right? This is like deep, like a 6-hour meditation. This is like deep within. A jungle or forest is typically a symbol of like the unexplored regions of the self.
Right.
So they're deep in it. Away from the paddy, away from the civilized, manicured agricultural world, deep into the wilds. Days and days, they find this tree of life, right, brimming with like this fruit of wisdom, and they gorge themselves. They gorge themselves. Just like a hungry caterpillar gorges itself on leaves. And then, because they've eaten so much, right, they're going 100 miles an hour, eating, gorging themselves. And then they fly right off the cliff into transformation, into the cocoon the tomb, the death, out of which they will then be reborn as butterflies.
Right.
And then the cycle continues from there, because the butterfly, gives birth to more caterpillars. It's a cycle.
Mm.
And this is a characteristic. I mean, at some point I'll give a talk on this, but this is a characteristic of the Hindu kind of worldview, view of the world, where it's cyclical and never ending.
Yeah.
Right. Even in the end, right, when at the end of the Kali Yuga, right, everything destroys, but then is reborn again in the next cycle of 4 yugas, right? As opposed to the sort of Judeo-Christian Western view, which is not cyclical but linear, right? At the end, when everyone is the second coming and everything, everyone will be divided into elect and damned, and then that's it. Curtain down, no more. It's not cyclical. It's done. There's only one Christ. He was born at this exact date. We're literally crucifying, right, the cycle of life onto the physical historical calendar, and the billions of years of life before that and the billions of years life after. No, there's no cycle. We're just we're setting it in a very literal, fundamentalistic way. But the secret of that is there's a cyclicality of that too, right? In every age, there's a group that tries to do that. So they're part of the cycle too. They just, it's part of the conceit of certain groups that, they're not supposed to know that. They're supposed to act as if it's not cyclical and the world is not eternal. So anyway, so you expect a transformation to happen. And the transformation that happens here is that the tiger, the inner masculine from the tiger's adopted son, same tiger, comes out and transforms the inner feminine, eats her. So when you see death in a dream, it's not biological. This is a part of you, right?
Right.
It's transformation. It's transformation. And so when this transformation happens, an extraordinary thing happens. At the point of transformation, this feminine figure sings her song. Sings her song. And this is, given the 4 or 5 stories we've read so far, Frog King, the dreams, if you do healing with me, the dreams we read, this is an extraordinary detail of the story. Right? When you go into transformation, when you go into, this pandemic, this economic disaster, this social upheaval and unrest, right? Everything going on. The last thing you do, at least in the profane, at least the last thing I would do, is to sing out my truth. Right. I'm not in the sacred. I'm scrabbling around to can we do a deal? Can we push this off another few months, right?
Yeah.
And so there's something extraordinary about this woman, right? And these 2 sisters are basically, there's only one inner feminine, right? So when you see 2 women, they're 2 aspects of the same inner feminine. You're just seeing different faces of her.
Right.
So in Snow White and the Wicked Witch are both the same inner feminine. You're seeing different aspects of the singular inner feminine. Right. And by showing the contrast, you learn something about the deeper nature of the one inner feminine. And same with the masculine, right?
Right.
So this song is the exact same song as the song that was suppressed in that story, which was called a song and story.
Story and song, yeah.
Right, where the story and song escaped out of the feminine, turned into coat and shoes for then the masculine to wear out.
Yeah.
Right, and we had some questions from the last time. Well, why doesn't she? And it's it's not a gender role thing in gross aggregate society. Right, it's it's inner masculine, inner feminine. We all have inner masculine, inner feminine within us, regardless of our gender. right? So you have an inner masculine and feminine, I have an inner masculine and feminine. And to say that, so it's not the male, it's the masculine, right? So it's saying something about how it's the job of the masculine to take the song out into the world, much as a herald for a king or queen, right, takes the declaration and goes out and reads it out in the town square. And it's not that, the masculine is like inferior or superior. It's like liver and lungs, right? The liver breathes in air, the lungs breathe in air, the liver like processes enzymes. It's just everyone's doing their specific part of the overall function.
Yeah.
And so the extraordinary thing here is that she's not suppressing her song. Even at the moment of transformation, she is not gripped with fear and suppresses her song. Even in the grip of fear, she sings her song. And even more extraordinarily, it is not just any song. It is a song of grief. It is a song of grief. And even in the song of grief, I'll just read it. My darling sister, what a bad moment I chose to send you for water. Now I'll never see you again, never, never. Not until I'm born again.
Yeah.
So she's grieving, but also she says explicitly, not until I'm born again. So this is not the end. It's not like, oh, that's it.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. I guess if I'm a Christian, I guess I'll just have to wait for like resurrection, which nobody really believes. Right. Which is part of the swindle of Christianity in a lot of ways. Right. It's just like, I don't know.
Mention of it though.
What's that?
There is a mention of resurrection. I mean, it does say that, but it's just.
No, I mean, I'm just being, just being a jerk about it. It's just like when I go to the Christian funerals of relatives, everyone is like so terrified of death. And the thing I never say is like, you've professed your faith so deeply your whole life, trying to like evangelize and do all this stuff. And the thing I think, but I never, because I would never say that, right? It's just like, I'm just trying to like support and hold space and everything. Is like, why do you fear death then? I would be like, if I had that sort of setup, I would be running into the arms of, I mean, it's like true faith. And I've never met, I mean, that's not true. That's not true. But by and large, it's like, it's almost like, maybe that's a whole other talk. Okay, so let's just keep going. Let's just keep going.
Yeah.
So even in grief, she mentions not as a superstitious, oh, I hope I come back. And it's like, oh, I guess I'll never see you, not until I'm born again. And the presumption is obviously I'm going to be born again. Obviously I'm going to see you again. But that doesn't even matter because I'm going to miss you.
Right.
I want to not see you for another 10 years. It like sucks.
Yeah.
Right. So even that grief, which a Christian would say, well, at least you get to come back and, who knows and everything. It's like even there to have that level of grief there's just something about it that's so beautiful to me, where it's sort of like, you have this, not just belief, but knowing that, yeah, of course I'm going to come back. I mean, that's not what I'm grieving over.
Right.
I mean, the world is not that like desolate. I mean, come on, grow up, right?
Yeah.
It's that, it's gonna be a long time before I see you again. And I don't like that. It's like it's like I have a friend who just is this incredible mother and like dotes on her kids. And it came to light one time about a year ago when we were all traveling together, that her son had never had a hard-boiled egg. Never had a hard-boiled egg. He like cut the egg open, and he was basically like, WTF, what is this? Because her mother, who is like a gourmet chef, right, has only ever made him soft-boiled eggs with the runny yolk.
Mm.
And when he cut it, we were in like, and this is like a grown boy, right? He's like, gorgeous, like capable, everything. We were in Morocco, and we were in like, traveling and we came to this like, place, and they served eggs, and he cut it open. And in French, he was like, basically, WTF, what is this? And his mom had to explain, oh, that's a hard-boiled egg. They just boil it longer, so the yolk is no longer. And he was like, huh, interesting. He was tasting it. He was like, oh, it's not very, but he ate it anyway, right? And I didn't say anything, but later in the desert, I was talking to my friend. I was like, you are a good mother. Like, how does your son not know what a hard-boiled egg tastes like? And I was like, that is a good life. That is a good life. So the extraordinary like crux of this to me is that right at that point, she spontaneously lets her song come out.
Yeah.
There's no suppression. There's no self-consciousness. There's no guilt. There's no shame. I guess in the same way that that my friend's son was like, what the hell is wrong with this egg? And you could like shame him and say, you're soft, you'll never make it in the real world. Or you can be like, isn't life beautiful?
Right.
That you can have a case where it's like, you only learn when you're like 19, what a hard-boiled egg is. And so it's just this kind of beautiful thing where there's no self-consciousness. It's just like this gift of blessing. Okay. So then her sister comes back. Oh, by the way, the point in the story is that she wasn't singing her song to call to her sister to come rescue me. Her sister never heard the song.
Yeah.
In the text here, it's like when she heard the instruments, it wasn't that she recognized the song because she never heard the song. It was that she just could tell. The younger sister could tell her sister's spirit was somewhere around.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So there's no reason why, like, this grief outpouring was not an attempt at communication.
Yeah.
It was pure expression for its own sake.
Yeah.
I.e., it was an act of karma yoga.
Right.
Action for its own sake without regard for the result of the action.
Right.
Right. It was not so my sister can, it was not so the tiger will have mercy on me. It was pure expression for no good reason.
Yeah.
For no good reason. Right. So we'll note that. We'll come back to that.
I also have a question that I wanted to ask at this point, because this came to me while you were talking about how she expresses grief about being separated until her next birth, right? So it was just pure grief that she said, I'm just sad that we're even separated like this at this point in time.
Right.
It reminded me of what Gretel says in the Hansel and Gretel story, where she says, what is this is so terrible that we are dying separately at the witch's hands. The witch will first bake me and then boil you. Right. And we die like this. I mean, it would have been better if we had been eaten by wild animals in the forest. At least then we would have died together.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's brilliant, Gauri. Yeah.
So here the grief is more that, anyway, we're going to die, but at least we could have got to die together instead of in this way. So the elder sister here is actually separated, and she does die separately. And it's like, that's the grief, that we are separated, not that I'm dying.
Yeah, it's not that we transform, it's that we, kind of lose sight of pieces of ourselves.
Right.
Right. I mean, this is very much a Hansel and Gretel kind of structure story, at least in the beginning. Yeah, because, they go into the jungle, find the crow, find the tree, and they start eating, just like Hansel and Gretel start eating the cottage. So there's a lot of that kind of thing happening. Yeah. Yeah, sorry. Going to... No. So, it's... there's so much here, right? There's so much here. And when we do, like, dream series like this is a series of, like, 4 or 5, like, humongous dreams now.
Yeah.
And there's just days and days of stuff we can talk about here, and it's all so good. So let me move a couple steps forward in the story then, right? So we hit play again, the story rolls forward. So the other sister comes back. She hears the tiger. She goes up into the tree and stays there for 7 days and 7 nights. The number 7 is a number of perfection and completion. The number 3 is a number of completion. The number 7 is a number of completion to perfection. Right? It's exactly perfect. It's just right. So she has gone into the cocoon, and then the sister is basically a twin. It's like they're both the same inner feminine.
Right.
So the inner feminine goes into the cocoon, singing her song of grief spontaneously in a karma yoga manner. Yeah. And then stays in the jungle, the cocoon of the jungle, to completion. Right. For 7 days and nights. That's what the 7 is. Like those of you who have done like mythic healing, continuing healing series, the Devil Sooty brother, he's down there for like 7 years. Even Snow White, it's the 7 dwarves, right? This sort of completion. It's the sense of when you see the number 7, it's basically saying, yeah, we're done. We're done to the point where it's done to the level where it's supposed to be done. Right. And that's important. Because basically it's saying everything that is happening here is the way it's supposed to happen. And so it's like, okay, so this is the way it's supposed to happen. Let's hit the play button, continue the story action, and see what else does it look like when everything's going the way it's supposed to. Right. The inner masculine comes back onto the scene, and they're cowherds, and cows are feminine. Right. And sacred, obviously. So in India, right? So it's a sacred feminine. And they are the caretakers and shepherds and protectors and nurturers, literally the animal husbanders of the sacred feminine. Yeah. So the 2 of them show up and they rescue her. They are the ones who signal. It's 7 days, 7 nights. It's to perfection. And now the masculine comes and not rescues her. I mean, she rescued herself, right? But they signal it's time to come out of the cocoon in stage 1. Right. So stage 1, she comes out. Stage 2 is when the other sister comes out. So let's see how that happens. So she goes, instantly marries the first cowherd. It's just like, it's like watching, a biological process, right? Where it's like, like a baby being born feet first. First one leg comes out, then the other leg comes out. And then, So here it's like, okay, so 2 masculines, 1 feminine. The 1 feminine joins with the masculine. Perfect. And then the other masculine is like this dangling like molecule, right? Sort of a carbon atom on the molecule. Right. And is waiting for the other inner feminine to come in. How does this happen? The hair, which is a symbol of wildness, your wild instinctive nature, turns into wild bamboo. Okay, fine. Right. The skull, which is a symbol of like intellect, right? The head. But the essence, I mean, the bone is like the essence, right? Turns into the snake gourd. So wildness and intellect, body and mind, right? Instinct and intelligence. And they turn into vegetation, 2 forms of vegetation, which is then taken by the inner masculine. Because the inner masculine plucks the fruit from the tree, which is the girl. And then the inner masculine takes the fruit of the other inner feminine and fashions it into musical instruments. Yeah. So just like the husband in the story and song, where they don't show this part of the action because they're showing a different part of like the biological cycles, right, and mechanisms. It's obvious that he will be the one to put on the coat and shoes and go out. Right. Here you actually see the action of how it happens.
Yeah.
And the action of how it happens is the inner masculine. Now, remember, we say the inner masculine has two jobs, right? Boundary protection and control, and then implementation manifestation.
Right.
Inner masculine is the COO, Chief Operating Officer, making sure all the trains leave the station on time. But the station schedule, what kind of service are we going to offer? Is it going to be trains? Is it going to be an airport? That's all decided by the feminine, because overall vision is the provenance of the feminine.
Right.
Okay. So she has set the hair and skull. They grow and develop in the cocoon of the jungle. And then the cowherds, the inner masculine comes back, and then they implement.
Yeah.
Right? They put on the coat and the shoes. They make these into instruments. In other words, they take the wildness of the basic sort of vision and transformation of the feminine, and they manifest it into a way in which the voice is re-enabled.
Right. Right.
The snake gourd is mute until it is fashioned into an instrument. The bamboo is mute until it is fashioned into a flute, and the breath of the masculine comes through.
Right.
Right. It's the breath that enables the voice, but the song is hers.
Yeah.
He is the enabler.
I remember this when we were discussing the story and song a few weeks ago, and I've given the link of the story both in Crowdcast as well as in Facebook Live.
Thank you.
So we were talking about how the woman, should suppress the story in the song, and the man, the husband, had figured out that this had happened, when he listened to what had happened through the flame. And he comes back and tries to find out what the story is about, what the song is, and what can be done about it. So I remember we had discussed, but the story doesn't actually tell us, does the man actually know what to do next? Does he actually know that he's supposed to wear the coat, wear the shoes, and take them out into the world? I mean, what is he going to do with it? So it just leaves it hanging at the end of the story. And here, it's like so organically, so naturally, these two cowherds know exactly what to do with the bamboo and the gourd. They kind of fashion the musical instruments out of them, and they start playing. It's like it's the most obvious thing to do. So they take the song, the same feminine song, and they play it out. It's like it's a metaphorical brilliance, how to turn the vision into an actual manifested song and how to provide a channel for it. So it felt like almost that question was answered here. Do you feel that as well?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, there is a phenomenon that happens when you see, I think I've talked about this here, when you see series of dreams, even over the course of one night, where you have a series of 3 dreams. If you're lucky enough to remember them in some detail, if you read the first dream, it will say something. This is the typical pattern. It will say something and then kind of alley-oop a question. Right? It will toss up a question.
Right.
So it will say something and then beg a question. Of like, okay, so this, but what about this? And then the next dream will be a zoom in on that question, answering that question.
Right.
Poetically.
Right.
And then the second dream will then alley-oop the next question. So so the answer to that is you would go left, not right. But then after that, do you go up or down?
Yeah.
And then the third dream will zoom in on the question of do you go up or down?
It's like a treasure hunt.
For the treasure hunt.
Yeah.
Or leading you along your golden thread.
Right.
Leading you along your golden thread. So where do we go next here? So the feeling. Go ahead.
Yeah, you were talking about the manifestation of the feminine's vision in this way through the musical instrument. Yeah.
So here's the funny thing. We've talked in past sessions about the golden thread, right? Through your life, through the labyrinth, the golden thread that leads you to the flow of your bliss.
Right.
And the idea here is, the overall motif that I get from here is that this story, this folktale, is showing you what is the nature and feeling of mechanics when the golden thread is flowing fully.
Right.
Unimpeded, uninterrupted. It's like a perfect orchestration of like the ball being passed around exactly perfectly, and then
Right.
like goes into the goal on the other end. That's why we call this the organic path of bliss. It's like when it's completely uninterrupted and undisrupted, this is how it goes.
Right.
Okay? And I'll tie it all together, but I want to finish the sort of second half of the story here.
Yeah.
So the golden thread comes out in the jungle of the song. Okay? Right. And it is a song of grief.
Right.
It's not a song about like where the gold bars are hidden.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a song of grief and loss.
Mm.
Okay. Completely unself-conscious, just like discovering what a hard-boiled egg is. Completely unself-conscious, right?
Right.
And so then the song continues, right, through the skull and the gourds, as enabled by the inner masculine.
Yeah.
Then the inner masculine plays the song. The other aspect of the inner feminine hears the song and says, and recognizes the golden thread. Right, so the golden thread is pulled forward. I mean, the golden thread starts in the rice paddy, actually, right?
Yeah.
They're there, and then the crow comes with the fruit of the golden thread, and then they follow the thread literally like breadcrumbs into the forest. Right, this is just like in Hansel and Gretel, where they follow the white bird.
Yeah.
So you follow the spirit who leads you deeper into the unexplored regions of your own inner self. You undergo a transformation, and you do not suppress your grief. That's the crux for me, the critical point. You, at the critical moment, you do not suppress your song of grief.
Yeah.
And that is what puts you into the cocoon for the full 7 years or 7 days, 7 nights. And then the inner masculine knows to come get you. So they transform the inner feminine and take her out of the forest. They transform the other aspect of the inner feminine, create the instruments through which her golden thread can continue.
Right.
So it's like American football, right? You can see how the inner masculine here, there are the linebackers, defenders of the quarterback in order to like get the golden thread of the ball down the field. So they're doing their jobs like in perfect orchestration. They sing the song, and then on the other side, it's up to the feminine again to recognize the golden thread when it comes out the other end.
Right.
But there's all these critical points where the thread can break. Where it's like, oh no, we have to listen to our like tyrannical, abusive father and stay and watch the rice paddy, so we can't go into like the forest. Right? That could have broken the thread.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? You went in, oh, I got eaten by a tiger, just be quiet, take the suffering, don't talk about it. That would have broken the thread.
Yeah.
Right? The cowherd's not coming in at the right time. The cowherd's saying like, this is just, let's just pull up the weeds and clear the bamboo for more rice paddies. That would have broken the thread, right?
Yeah.
So many points at which the thread could be broken. I mean, I was expecting the crow to do something, or at least bargain for the fruit. I was expecting the cowherds to like run astray and be dunderheads and not know what to do next. And at every point I expected something to go like left or right. It just kept flowing. And I was like, this is like a perfect, it's like watching a figure skater doing a perfect 10. And I'm like, maybe that is the point of the story. Maybe that's what the story is showing.
Yeah.
So then the inner feminine on the other side recognizes the golden thread, does not deny it, and explicitly does not push it back on the masculine. say, hey, I think something's going on here. And they'll be like, we don't know. We just work here. We're just playing the music. Right? She takes the part that is appropriate to her, which is recognition of the vision. Right? The masculine's job is to express the vision, protect it, manifest it. But whether they're doing it right or not, and what it is that's actually coming through them, that's the job of the visionary feminine. Now, this is all within you, right? This is all within you.
Yeah.
So she recognizes it. She draws the thread forward, and she lies in wait to watch for what comes out of in the home. And what comes out extraordinarily is the sister herself. And she instantly recognizes her. She doesn't say, oh, it's a ghost, go away. It's not my real sister. You're just a phantom. My sister's dead. Forget it, forget it. She's like, no, she just like the first sister reflexively, instinctively sang her song without any self-consciousness. The second sister burst into the hut and said, don't you ever leave me like that again.
Right.
There's no questioning. There's no like, are you my real sister? Who are you? Even in the Odyssey, it took Penelope all these rounds to finally like accept Odysseus back and verify his identity.
Yeah. Well.
Here it was like what they say in the Upanishads, right? That image of, just like as you hit the flint with the rock, the spark comes out, right? In just that way. The sister saw her sister and instantly ran in, and like 6 different things happened all at once, just like the spark when you hit it with a rock.
Right.
She wasn't like, who are you? Oh my gosh, where have you been? She was like, don't you ever leave me like that again. And they hug. And then the final sort of big signal that this is like the way it's supposed to go. And I'll apologize for the patriarchal tones of this, okay? But when the friends returned, they rejoiced at their union. The bachelor married the elder sister, and the families lived happily next to each other. And this is the signal, bringing up sons. Sorry, it should be kids, right? But it's the patriarchy, so they always talk about the sons as like abundance and whatever. Bringing up the sons, the grandsons, and the great-grandsons. When you go down 3 generations, it's like, okay, this is like the gold star, #1 world champion like scenario. Because you're like, you have all these future versions of emerging self and abundance and prosperity, et cetera, et cetera. So here, another sort of interesting detail is that in a folktale, when a figure transforms, you expect it to come out the other end in an emergent form, right? So when you see babies and children in dreams, kittens, puppies, they are a symbol of like the emerging version of that part of you, right? So in other words, when you see a sister die and get transformed by being eaten by a lion, you expect her to come back out of the cocoon in butterfly form, in an emergent form. So in the form of a baby daughter, in the form of a kitten, in the form of a baby snake, right? So typically when I'm like, when I say one dream begs the question of another, if in the first dream, an advisee comes to me and says, well, I dreamt that my grandfather died. I'm like, okay, and I explain all this. And I'm like, okay, so in your next dreams, we'll probably wait for any baby boy or a puppy or whatever to come. Because, the question that begs of the grandfather dying is like, what will the emergent form be like?
Yeah.
So you're looking for the emergent form. And then like 9 times out of 10, the advisee will be, well, actually, I had another dream that night and there was a baby boy in it. And I'm like, okay, well, why didn't you tell me that? Come on, we ain't got all day. I'm not getting paid by the hour. Come on, let's go. And so we continue on from there, right? So so the extraordinary thing here is that she dies and is transformed. She turns into bamboo and snake oil and everything. And when she comes back in her original form.
Yeah.
Which means she will get to express her bliss from her original form.
Right.
Which is an opportunity nobody gets. Like I can't think of a single other folktale from any tradition where it comes back as their own original form and they get to like continue.
Yeah.
Like, into like, children and grandchildren and great grandchildren. Right? That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
So not only do you get the full abundance, and we know this from Shakespeare too. Every Shakespeare comedy ends with a wedding, right? Every Shakespeare tragedy ends with a death. The prince and the princess and the prince and the princess both are married and both are like fully fertile and abundant, happily ever after.
Right.
And here we don't mean, when we say procreativity in a dream, in mythopoetics, we're not talking about biological children. I mean, it could be, right? But we're talking about generativity, creativity within you. It's like if you're an artist, you're just like prolific, blasting in all directions.
Right.
That's what children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren mean. And so here, there's something about the way the following and drawing out and protection of the golden thread, something about the way that was prosecuted that allows you to actually have the original form back.
Yeah.
I've never seen that anywhere before. It's just like, it's absolutely...
it's like you say that, the emergent form and transformation coming in another form. I'm actually thinking if we were to reimagine the story in the normal pattern that we see folktales like this, as the sister would be up the tree. There'd be one cowherd who would come and persuade her to come down, marry her. And then they would have a baby girl who miraculously knows the song of the older sister and she starts singing it.
Exactly.
Probably that happened in that form. But here it's like, it's the same sister. And there are two cowherds to begin with, just to correspond to inner feminines. And then, the sister comes back in the original form. So,
right. I mean, even in Hansel and Gretel, right? It starts with the biological mom. The mom dies. There's a stepmom.
Yeah.
The stepmom turns into the witch.
Yeah.
And the witch is killed. And then Gretel becomes the queen of the kingdom, of queendom at that point. Right?
Yeah.
So it would be as if in Hansel and Gretel, the original mom who died came back to life, which is, of course, what happens in Gretel, right? She reassumes her dominance and power in the queendom.
Right.
But here it's like, no, we're not messing around. We're like putting our foot down and say, no, even the same woman. And I'm like, I imagine sitting with these like old storytellers over tea, and I'm like, really, even the same woman? It's like, not always, but in this case, when it's a perfect 10, even the same woman. And I'm like, whoa, didn't even know that was an option.
You see that happening. And I wonder if you would attribute that, like you said, there is a natural flow of the golden thread, not interrupted, disrupted, or cut off by anything. Everyone obeying their instincts, everyone just following at that moment whatever the spirit signals you to do, and you just do it. But I wonder if the original motivator and the driver of all of these transformations was the desire for that fruit, the wild fruit.
Absolutely.
And how spontaneously they just kind of responded to that desire. So is there a connection between the desire and the bliss that the story is trying to tell?
Absolutely. It's desire that leaves you away from, the bird in hand of the rice paddies.
Right.
right? It's desire that brings you in, and then that's the thing that triggers your transformation. You notice it wasn't they go into the forest and a tiger eats them. They go into the forest, they find the tree of life. Like that tree with all the fruit, I mean, that's the same tree in the Garden of Eden in Genesis, in the Judeo-Christian tradition.
Right.
Right. They gorge themselves on the tree, on the fruit of the tree, and then transformation happens.
Yeah.
Right. Like the tiger wasn't the guardian of the tree and ate her as a punishment for eating the fruit. Right. It's not punishment. Like we said in the very first session of this pandemic series.
Yeah.
The pandemic can be seen as punishment, or it can be seen as transformation. Here, the tiger transforming the girl was not punishment, it was transformation. But you could read it either way. The other thing about bliss is, to me, there's this very exquisite connection between this bliss thing and the fact that she sang her song. Which makes me think of like, when I work with people and they do healing and then they start thinking about doing their bliss, they often have this attitude of, oh, is it too late for me? Is it too late for me? Right. And I've got to tell you, not to, I don't say this, I mean, I say this genuinely, like, listen, I would be like this too. This is a very normal human thing, but it is adorable, this pattern that I see of people will say, is it too late for me? Regardless of whether they're 70 or 80 or they're 20 or 30. Like, people in their like late 20s, early 30s going like, oh, I don't know. Is it too late for me? And I'm like, no, I think you've still got time. And people who are in their 70s are like, oh, woe is me. Is it too late for me? Right. And obviously the answer is no, because regardless of their age, right, the ones who sort of get this level of clarity have a different kind of attitude. It's just like the switch flipping from punishment to transformation. The switch flips from, it's not about achievement, it's about expression.
Right.
It doesn't matter who hears my song. I wish to sing it.
Yeah.
Or I am spontaneously singing it with no active will. And the only thing I'm actually doing is not stopping it.
Right.
Right. If I don't do this and I do this, the water will flow through my hand just fine.
Yeah.
Right. So that is like the essence of karma yoga. That's why I say of the 4 yogas, the one I teach is karma yoga, because I teach bliss. And the way I teach it is action for its own sake without regard for the result of the action. And what action do you take? You take the action that you do for no good reason, which is your bliss, which is out of desire, not want or need.
Yeah.
So when this switch flips on a person, they start to have this different attitude. They're like, regardless of my age, I want to figure it out. Even if I end up expressing it for like half an hour before I die, that's enough.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't matter who sees my artwork or who, whatever. It's true karma yoga. The action itself is the point. Like a flower in the jungle blossoming on the end of a vine. It doesn't blossom because it thinks there's enough people around me to say like, oh, what a beautiful flower. Right? It blossoms whether or not anyone sees it. It's not communication, it's expression.
Right.
So here, if the song is sung in that way, even when the sister is not around, she has expressed her song of grief, artistic, brilliance of grief, without regard for the result of that expression. That to me is the single thing that makes everything go flawlessly till the end. And the song is this song of grief, and letting that song out is what saves her. So it's like when you say, oh, I'm 70, I haven't done the things I wanted to do, woe is me. And then somehow the switch flips in you and you're like, all right, so I'm screwed. I wasted my whole life being a stockbroker and I'm screwed.
Right.
So that's it. I'm done. I'm the biggest loser. I'm the most spiritually sort of, failed, person that's ever walked the earth and all of humanity. It will never be better. Everything's horrible. And I stink. And I'm still breathing.
Mm.
Well, I mean, that was it. I was ready for the curtain to come down. And yet here I still am. The spotlight's still on me. The audience is still there. And I'm like, oh, I thought the play was over. And you're like, okay, well, nothing matters anymore. I've already like screwed everything. And the moment where the flower starts to come out is, well, if nothing matters and nobody gives a shit anyhow, and I don't give a shit anyhow, I mean, what do I want to do?
Yeah.
What do I want to do? It's like I've lost. Everyone's gone home, right? The first place trophies all went out. No one's coming to me to like endorse their running shoes or whatever. My career is over. I'm done. Yeah. And after that, you're like, well, what do I want to do anyhow? And ideally, you say, well, these are the things I think I wanted to do, regardless of what anyone says, because nobody cares anyway. I'm already bottom of the heap. I'm just going to do them for like no good reason.
Yeah.
And that is the golden thread.
Right.
That is the golden thread. And some notes I took when, you took from me, actually. Thank you on our call on this. So for me, when I read the story, the reflection I have is that when you accept grief, you don't just let the song escape. You actually sing the song.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's not this spontaneous, like, oh, woe is me. It's like you let the song out and then you actually develop the embers. You like fan the flame of the song. Right? You wait for it to grow up into like bamboo and gourd. And then you actually go in and like your inner masculine takes over and puts noble effort, right? Fashioning the additional portals through which the song will come through.
Yeah.
So that we say it was not an accident. The song of grief was not an accident. Here, let me sing it again.
Right.
And again. And again. So it's allowing grief, expressing it, singing the song in a karma yoga manner without regard for the result, and doing all of this willingly.
Right.
Doing all of it willingly, not drag, kicking, and screaming. So all of these together, allowing grief, expressing it, singing the song in a karma yoga way without regard for the result, and then doing all of this willingly. There's something about this alchemical formula to me that doesn't just permit the golden thread to continue, but somehow like drives it forward, amplifies it to the point where even the original sister is revived. It's like the golden thread is so strong. It's like, no, we're not just gonna like keep going. Let's grab that vinyl record that we thought we threw away. Let's pull it back and like hear her original song again too. Because we can, right? Because that's how much power is flowing along this golden thread. It's like it's basically unbreakable at that point.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like when you listen to like John Lennon sing or whatever in like his studio, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, if only I could like ever make a sound like that or have an expression of flow of the muse through me like that. Just once in my life, it would be incredible. And then you like, there's this one black and white of him singing like early in the days of the Beatles. He's like, they're singing like Love, Love Me Do or something. And the crowd is going wild. And then the camera like goes up close to like John Lennon. And you realize the way his mouth is moving, he's chewing gum.
Okay.
He's just like chewing gum, like doing this thing that he's going to get knighted for. And like the world is going, like the muse is flowing through him so strongly that he's just like what do you mean I have to prepare? What do you mean I have to do vocal exercises? He's at a level of game where he's doing this while he's chewing gum, and it's all fine, right? It's all fine. And the crux for me then is allowing grief, expressing it, singing it without regard for the result, and then doing all that willingly. Yeah. This is the extraordinary thing. So how did the sister get to come back in her original form? The things she did, no one ever in life or even in fairy tale ever does.
Yeah.
We always resist, deny, stuff our song down. The song has to escape, right? Yeah. When we're sleeping. No one does all four of these willingly. Allowing grief, expressing it, singing it without regard for the result, and doing it willingly. I don't do all these four things willingly. I won't even allow grief. You have to drag me kicking and screaming. But I think the story is not an allegory saying, well, you better do this, because it's impossible. You will never do this. You will never do this. Okay, so don't even write down, this is my new wellness regimen. Screw that. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. So you can relax, because it will never happen.
Yeah.
So the story is not an allegory. It's a symbol. It's a symbol to say when all of these happen, everything happens without conflict. There's no kidnapping. There's no thieving. There's no deal with the devil to get the fruit from the crow. Right? There's no punishment for eating the fruit of the tree, a la Genesis. Right? The quaternity is restored. The original singer of the song is restored.
Yeah.
And you have children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Bounty upon bounty, upon abundance, without any conflict.
Yeah.
Even when the tiger ate the sister, it was transformation.
Yeah.
And there was no conflict. The sister didn't fight. The tiger didn't threaten.
Yeah.
It just happened. It was like that.
Yeah.
Sing your song without stuffing it down. Sing it willingly. Sing it without regard for the result. And I think it's no accident that this song is a song of grief. Right? Where you have suffered a loss and you sit with it. You just sit with it. It hurts like hell, and you don't numb the pain with drugs or alcohol or whatever. The pain is the fire of transformation.
Yeah.
And if you can stand it, which nobody can.
Yeah.
Right? If you can stand it, don't pour water on the fire. Let it heat you and burn you and cook you and kill you. Right? That's why we call this in healing, we call it soothing. Right? So drugs, alcohol, whatever. And what I always say is I don't expect you to never soothe or shield. That's not human.
Right.
Right? You will be in pain. You will soothe. But then if all of the different options of soothing is to sort of quench this one fire, then they're interchangeable. Any soothing will do.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't have to drink whiskey. You can just watch tons of Netflix and play stupid games on your phone. I mean, the dosage may vary. You may need to watch 3 days of Netflix to numb yourself enough. The equivalent of one alcohol bender or whatever, right? But at least you won't die, right? And you'll be able to live to fight another day.
Yeah.
So I'm soothing. You're not going to not soothe, but let's just pick our soothing carefully so that we can continue the golden thread. We don't cut it off by killing ourselves. This younger sister shows this other aspect. So one aspect of the inner feminine role is to sing the song of grief without suppressing it.
Yeah.
The other aspect with the other sister, which is the same inner feminine, this is the different aspects of her job, right? Is this element of curiosity, which then completes the final transformation.
Right.
Right. This is an element of self-awareness, of being seen by yourself. Right? The two sisters are different aspects of your inner feminine. It's the sister who has curiosity and then acts on it. Right? Because the husband's I don't know, somebody's cleaning my house for free. I'm just going to leave it alone. Typical bachelor, right? Typical bachelor. But he's all right. He plays his flute, so he's doing what we need him to do. That's fine. That's fine. But it's the inner feminine who's like her curiosity.
Mhm.
She has curiosity. She acts on it, and then she calls it out without suppressing it. She doesn't say, "Oh, it's a ghost." Right? I don't know what to do. She instinctively rushes in and says, "Don't go." Right?
Yeah.
The flash of singing the song without regard for the result is replayed here. The flash of recognition, the curiosity. And that curiosity is the exact same curiosity in the earlier example where we were like, oh, I'm the biggest failure in the world. My life is over. And yet here I am. And when you sit there for long enough, ideally, you actually then say, I mean, well, what do I want to do? And that is the curiosity. Like, it's not out of fear anymore. I have no clue. I'm just randomly, perfectly, idly curious. So nothing matters anymore. Nobody gives a shit. I don't give a shit either. And so then the flower of curiosity can finally start to bud and flower.
Right.
And you ask yourself the question, what the hell do I want to do?
Right.
I have no idea. Maybe I'll just sit here and wait and see what comes to me.
Right. And this curiosity is always also, I mean, about the younger sister at least, is the constant awareness, as you said, and recognition of the dead sister. I mean, even if the sister's not around, she still recognizes her song.
Right.
She knows the song. And then when she sees the sister, she instantly recognizes her for who she is. So it's like looking at her own reflection in the mirror and always knowing where she is. So I find that in curiosity and self-awareness is where, you know, the whole presence and the groundedness of the younger sister is. So she knows, I mean, there is no self-doubt. There's not a second of second guessing. Is that really my sister's song, or am I hallucinating, or am I just imagining this because I miss my sister? You know, not a second of that.
And there is this thing across different story traditions. I mean, you see this in the healing process too, when we work with our healing advisees.
Right.
Where it's like you allow yourself through curiosity, all the little questions of curiosity for no good reason. Oh, Artie says like any soothing will do. So it's like, all right, so instead of drinking next time, maybe I'll eat chocolate or watch Netflix. You know, just to sort of see if I can exchange. Right. Or it's sort of like, I don't know, what is my lost board member, right? What is my bliss? And asking it without fear. It's just like, no, I just want to know. I'm not saying I'm going to do it. You know, my life sucks. I'm the biggest dunderhead. I'm incompetent. So I'm never going to fulfill my bliss. So screw all that. But what do I feel like doing, you know, like this afternoon? If it doesn't matter, I may as well just do whatever the hell I want to do. And that's how the golden thread sneaks back in. Right after everything's burned down to like rubble, because sometimes that's what it takes. Or so when you follow curiosity and you allow yourself to express without fear, right, without self-consciousness, you will often be led to this point where the rest of the healing process is instantaneous.
Right.
Right, because it's recognition of what's happening. So in healing, this will often happen where it's like, I realize that this thing that I fear, we call it the lost board member, is actually me. And when you're doing the exercise with the lost board member and you realize this is actually me, this is my own part of my own self that I stuffed down when I was 7. and you kind of knew that before, but when you shine a light on it, it's instantaneous that you stop. Because it's like, there's this thing stabbing my leg that's been stabbing my leg for 30 years. And I'll pour whiskey, I'll do anything to make this pain stop. And then when we sing the song of grief, basically, and we talk to the leg to say what's going on, the leg will be like,
it's you.
And you'll be like, and when you realize it's horrifying, and it's an instantaneous dropping of the knife, instantaneous. And it's not liberating. You're horrified. It's like you realize the person that has been sex trafficking my own children is me. It's that horrific when you realize it. But because of that, it's instant. You don't need to then put in place like a wellness regimen with all this stuff to be a better person or be more mindful so that we can all make the world a better place. No. It's like once you realize it, you stop instantly.
Right.
There's a story we tell sometimes called the Fisher King. That's from Middle Christian, kind of medieval tradition, Celtic tradition. And it's one of the Knights of the Round Table, Parzival, looking for the Grail. And in one of the last scenes of this epic cycle, Parzival is fighting this pagan knight whom neither of them knows they're actually half-brothers. They have the same father. And they didn't know. They didn't even know the other existed. And basically, it's prophesied that Parzival has this sword that's been given to him by the Grail King that is unbreakable. And he's basically invincible with the sword. But the prophecy is that you will never lose with this sword, but only at the critical moment. Once and only once, it will break. And so he's fighting, the name of the pagan knight is Feraphiz. So he's fighting Feraphiz. He doesn't even ask his name, he just starts fighting because it's a pagan knight, right? So a Christian knight around 1200 AD, it's like you see a pagan knight, kill, sick him, kill. Right? There is no like courtesy, there is no whatever. And in these systems, the pagan knight is a symbol typically of your body, of your instinct, of your intuition. So it's the intellect of Christianity trying to stamp out body, sex, intuition, all of that stuff. So he starts fighting his half-brother without knowing it. And in the middle of this fight, he's like matching him blow for blow. He's like, why can't I beat this guy? It's crazy. And so he fights even harder because he's like brute forcing it. He's like, it's got to be, I'm invincible. And at that critical moment, Parzival's sword breaks.
Right.
And Feraphiz has got him. And Feraphiz sees, and he doesn't know that he's related. He sees that this knight's sword is broken. And he puts up his sword and he says, well, there's no honor in killing an unarmed man. Why don't we go over to this grassy meadow over here and like sit down and rest ourselves? And Parzival's like, well, you're a stinking, awful pagan knight, but I guess you've got me. So, all right, I'll come sit with you. And there's this beautiful scene of the two brothers, just like the two sisters here, except with the two sisters, there's no conflict. This is like the golden, path, the golden thread of bliss, right? But, this is a Christian story, so it's like there's a lot more conflict. So the two brothers sit, and the story says they take off their helmets, and they look at each other, and it's as if they're looking into a mirror. And then there's this beautiful, like Odysseus and Penelope, like, what's your name? I'm the Angevin, and blah blah blah. They realize they have the same father. And in the text, basically, Parzival says, I realized I was fighting myself. And so I stopped.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
I realized I was fighting myself, and so I stopped.
Yeah.
Instant. The moment you realize it's your own hand stabbing your leg, you drop the sword, you see that this has just been an awful state of affairs, but you realize it. So it's like when we talked about the different roads to enlightenment, right?
Yeah.
There's like a slow road where you plod and you study and you try hard. And then there's the sudden road where you see it instantly and you just stop.
Right.
And so this story itself is like a knife dropping moment. If the song had not been sung, then maybe the next part of the story would be like the story in song where the song was stuffed down and the cowherds need to come in and get it out, conflict with the masculine, bargaining with the crow, the tiger coming out of the jungle to like chase you even further, and it would have gone on from there.
Yeah.
But here, that's what makes this story extraordinary. Everything went swimmingly, almost as like a template of perfection to say like, this is how it would go. It will never go like this, but just so you have like the sewing pattern to know what you're like shooting for.
Right.
And then just don't worry and just go.
Yeah. Yeah, it does answer that question as well that we had in the story and song session where, you know, the story and song escape out of the woman when she's sleeping.
Right.
Because they realize this woman is never going to express herself, so we might as well find our own way out. And the question that lingered there is, why did she suppress them in the first place? It's almost like this story.
Just be careful here.
Yeah.
I always try to be careful not to say woman, but to say inner feminine.
Right. Yeah.
This inner feminine, this could be my inner feminine.
Yeah.
I'm a guy.
Yeah.
Right? It could be my inner feminine where the story and song are like, this dude's inner feminine is never going to let the story out.
Yeah.
So I want to be careful because I want this feeling to be like, you know, it's within all of us as humans. It's all of us as humans.
Yeah. Yeah. So the question there was, why was it suppressed in the first place? And then you realize that, you know, not suppressing it is so rare that it never really happens, and suppressing it is just, I think the reason that story didn't even venture into explaining why the suppression happened is because suppression is so common. It's
common,
like
obviously.
Everybody suppresses. You know, you want to sing your story and say, you know, sing your song and tell your story, but then Monday morning you've got a meeting and you've got to send emails, so you know what, that can wait.
Yeah. Forget it.
It can be as simple as that. I mean, you always suppress.
Who cares about your song anyway? How are you going to make money doing that? All right.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So we've got more things, better things to do. We've got more, you know, money and want and need to address. So that always gets priority. The paddy field gets priority, not the wild food that the crow brings.
Yeah.
You know,
You followed a crow into the forest for how many days? Like, what did I tell you about being safe? Right? You're going to get eaten by a tiger. You know, there's tigers in that jungle.
Yeah. You're always warned about that. So now it kind of makes sense to me why the story didn't even venture to give an explanation.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, this happens. Why do you need to know why?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's the sequencing of it. So do you want to give the exercise?
Okay, I'll give the exercise, and then we'll close the session.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Artie.
Thank you. Good job. Thank you. All right. So so the exercise I thought of just sharing here is just super simple. Given everything we've said, to me at least, the crux of this is this song of grief. Is a song of grief. And so the exercise, very simply, is to sit quietly, maybe with a pen and paper to like write as things come to you. It's a very simple single prompt, which is, what is your song of grief? And have you allowed yourself to sing it? What is your song of grief? And have you allowed yourself to sing it? That's it. All right. So thank you, everyone. Now I'll go ahead and close our session. So our next session is Sunday. It's free. It's open to the public. Please feel free to invite others. And you have the call to action link, the green box in your Crowdcast, so you can sign up for the next Sunday session now. And in Facebook, in the text of the live post, there will be a link for you to sign up for next Sunday session as well. And I'll go ahead and close our session now. So I hereby close the session of our shared sacred space. Thank you for holding this space with me, and thank you for sharing the nourishment, the emotional nourishment, and the spiritual nourishment of the shared sacred space with me and us. I give you my blessing. Go in peace, bestowed with blessing, free of fear, free of threat, and free of the undue control of others. Have a great day, have a great week, and I will see you all in the next session. Thank you.